If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. My guest today is Chris McLeod, director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Duke University. Chris, before we dive into our discussion of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be interested in lifelong learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually a recovering lawyer by training. I started out, in Washington, D.C., doing a variety of political things, but really migrated after a couple of years to the nonprofit sector and worked for Habitat for Humanity and then moved into higher ed, where I've spent most of my career in development and fundraising. I think midlife, I was ready for kind of a refresh and a pivot and didn't want to travel so much. So I took a role in the programmatic side and took this job at Duke. And I think lifelong learning is one of the themes looking back. As Steve Jobs says, you only understand it when you look back. But I think it's a natural for me. I'm the daughter of a professor, and we all grew up just, being very curious and loving to learn. So I feel fortunate to be paid to do that every day.
That's awesome. And so the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute is a product of the Bernard Osher Foundation, right?
Well, it's actually, let me tell you a little bit about the network. We are one of 125 Osher institutes across the country. Nearly all of them are associated with colleges and universities. So they've been learning and retirement programs that were developed and then later endowed by Bernard Osher. So what is so, especially as a fundraiser, I really appreciate about the Osher Foundation is they really recognize the different cultures and operating practices of all the different programs. They're really different courses offered and programmatic activities depending on the university and the community in which the institute's located. But there are hardly any strings attached. Most of the endowment grants were made to programs that had at least 1,000 members. So we're one of the 10 largest of the 125 institutes. But the great thing for your listeners is there are Osher institutes in every single state. And in some states like California and Florida, there are, more than 20. So it's usually most folks find they're not very far from one.
That's great. And who typically participates in the classes provided by the Osher Lifelong Learning Institutes?
Well, the majority of our members range between, I would say 50 to, even 92, I think is the oldest member that we're aware of. Some Osher institutes have a minimum year, you need to be 50 years old. We don't have an age limit. So the majority of our members, though, are either retired or working part-time. And most of the classes happen during the day, although that's changing too, as boomers are working longer.
So why is lifelong learning important for aging well?
Well, it's, so many studies have shown the importance of lifelong learning and its relationship to longevity. I think it's a lot about keeping the mind active, staying socially connected to others. There have been a lot of, one of the things that Bernard Osher, I think, recognized way ahead of the research scientists was the relationship between longevity and lifelong learning. He is 96 years old today, and he's been funding these organizations for pretty much the past 30 years. Excuse me. Well, we're 47 years old, but we've been endowed since the early 2000s. So he was an early funder of that. But in terms of longevity, I think one of the things we're seeing is this kind of epidemic of social isolation and loneliness. More and more older adults are living alone. because men and women aren't marrying, they're divorcing young and remaining single, or getting the whole silver tsunami, they are divorcing late in life. And so I think the Osher Institute communities really provide a great opportunity for older adults post-retirement to develop a new network of colleagues. That's what we hear from folks who are retired is I've just been lost. I haven't, I've missed my colleagues. I don't know who I am anymore. If I'm not a physician, if I'm not a professor, if I'm not a teacher. So we find that folks, particularly those who really love learning, find their way to the institutes and really find kind of a new lease on life, new communities. I have a physician who teaches for us now, and I think he's been teaching for us for 3 years, but when I met him in the halls, he said, I just want you to know, OLLI saved my life. He said, I was working 78 hours a week, and then I came to a full stop. And he goes, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. So he found his way to OLLI. And I think after a term or two as a member, he started teaching and has never looked back.
Now, you kind of answered this next question a little bit, but I'm sure there's more to add to it. So do you have any favorite stories about students and or faculty in the program?
I always feel a bit emotional talking about a former associate dean, actually at the other university at UNC Chapel Hill, who took a Broadway musical course early in the pandemic. And when we were hosting an instructor appreciation event, I asked her if she would say a few words about this instructor. And she shared that Alan Teasley, who's one of our most beloved instructors, her quote was, he brought music back into my life. That she started listening to, Sondheim and many of the old musicals during the pandemic. And it was a time where she was mostly alone, even though her children live locally. And so much so that she would open up her scrapbooks when she was able to with her grandchildren and show them pictures of some of the musicals that she went to. And her grandchildren ended up buying her a turntable so she could listen to a lot of her old, musical albums. So here's someone who was an early pioneer in medicine at UNC Chapel Hill, who really rediscovered, the joy of music. One of the patterns I see is we have a lot of folks who, were pre-professionals. We're pre-med and engineering, and they took all sciences in college back in the 50s and 60s, right? And so they're discovering poetry and literature and art history for the first time. And conversely, women who I think were discouraged from math and science, at that era, are rediscovering really their love of, cosmology or astronomy, or we even had a class on the history of calculus, if you can believe it. I'll disclose I dropped that class twice.
I was just thinking I'd be interested in that class. I still have my college calculus textbook. And a couple of summers ago, I decided, I'm going to refresh myself on calculus because I use some of this in some of the different research I do. And I just need to kind of understand it a little bit better. And then I realized I don't remember trig enough to do the calculus. I'd have to go back and do trig. And it's like, I don't have time for this right now. So I need a course that would actually kind of direct me through it a lot faster.
We have an outstanding, I think our program is really known for really extraordinary art and architecture courses, as well as science and technology. So check us out. About 60% of our enrollment is online. Most OLLIs have gone back exclusively in person or are doing some hybrid courses, but we've just found many of our members want to stay online.
So how is one able to participate in the programs offered by the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute? I should just call it OLLI because that's what you've been calling it, right?
OLLI.
Call it OLLI at Duke and nationwide. So do you have to be local? You said some of the classes are online, some are in person. Tell us a little bit about how the whole program functions.
Every Osher Institute, it's based on a membership model. One thing, again, I credit Mr. Osher with is the business model. There's membership revenue, there's course revenue, and then you have an endowment that throws off some income to help support. And then most of the institutes do some modest annual fund type of fundraising. Some have a more sophisticated kind of major gifts plan giving program. But the membership fees are anywhere from $35 to, I would say most are under $100. We charge $60 a year. And that allows you to participate in the special interest groups, attend many of the social activities, and enroll in courses that are priced a la carte.
Okay.
Courses run anywhere from $10 to $12 an instructional hour. Some are a little bit more. You'll find some of the California schools and schools in the Northeast do more of a package model where you pay a certain fee and you can take as many courses as you want. The larger OLLIs have just found that a la carte works best because we have a lot of wait lists.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but we have several instructors, and so we can't always guarantee enrollment. But it's not a criteria other than the ability to pay. And then almost all of the Osher Institutes have what we call a community membership or scholarship assistance that will make it, available to people who can't afford the $60 in some of the course fees. So there are subsidies available.
Still seems extremely reasonable when you compare how much college tuition is these days.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, I think this generation is probably one of the most well-funded, well-supported, best savers that we'll ever see in our lifetime. And they are very passionate about their courses. So they can get very unhappy about a 10-week, $100 course. You'd be surprised. Mm-hmm. But I do think one of the things that works so well is, probably 80% of our membership renews every year. There's about a 20% churn that's related to people moving, health, just changing interests. But many of the members, once they join, feel such a strong sense of connection, they just sign up every year. They may take one course in the fall, do some traveling, and then come back in the winter and take 3 or 4 courses at once. So most of our Osher Institutes program year round.
Okay. And what's the demographic? Because you've heard you talk about physicians and former professors. Yeah. Do you get kind of a broader kind of brushstroke population?
We do. I tend to, when I'm pitching in the triangle, tend to focus on our members. We have the majority of members, are college educated, but we have many that are not. I think being in the Research Triangle Park, we have, a large number of retired academics and professionals. 72% of our membership has a graduate degree, MD, PhD, JD. But we have people who are teaching who don't necessarily have those degrees. We just find good teachers are good teachers, and we let them teach what they want to teach. So we have a lot of retired educators, public school system, who also teach, who are master teachers.
And the learners, are they kind of across the population as well?
Yes, they are. I think, again, demographically, because of the affordability, I think that's one thing people have really appreciated is there is a sense of kind of, shared values. You don't really see the economic differences at play until you introduce kind of travel programs, which might be more expensive and, involve trips abroad or throughout the U.S. And most of the Osher programs do have some sort of a travel program.
Nice. And so intellectual wellness is a key component to what we kind of refer to on the podcast as well-centered fitness and aging well. Question I ask of our guests are, what are you doing personally to age well?
Thank you. Well, I'm grateful to be able to have meaningful work. To me, doing work that matters is a really key piece of having meaning and purpose at this stage of my life. Finding ways to contribute in the community. I've also been introduced to a program that we started offering to our members called Vivo, Team Vivo, which is an online fitness platform that offers small custom fitness classes for older adults, pretty much 50 and older. And the classes are no more than 8 or 10 people. And so as part of our offering that, I participate twice a week in a 45-minute strength building, which is really, really important for older adults in terms of maintaining balance, mobility, and the ability to live independently. So I would say, and I read a whole lot. So
I would guess you have to be an avid reader.
Who challenge me, and our members as well. We're a feedback culture, so they keep me on my toes. So
what are some of your favorite classes that are offered in your program?
Well, we have a writing memoir class, which I had the privilege during the early days of the pandemic to support. And that is really a beautiful thing to I was just providing kind of background tech support of listening to men and women's stories about growing up and their parents and their family and their children. So I also think our art and architecture courses are really very broad ranging. We have an instructor who is in, museum education at the Nasher Museum at Duke, and who does some beautiful classes on, how to experience art. So you don't necessarily have to have an art history background, but she's teaching you how to look at art and how to experience it. Ruth Cacavalli is the instructor. And I tend to, gravitate more to the smaller classes because there's a little more intimacy there. But we also have some very popular larger classes. Our Broadway musical courses, there was a course on women composers of Broadway that was very popular. I think the one this term is on Sondheim. So I like music because those are not courses I took in college. And I think, the school I went to, many of my classmates had taken art history in high school. So I was super intimidated to take those type of courses and waited till I was out of school to take them. So those are probably my interests.
I don't think I appreciated my art history classes in college quite as well as I would probably appreciate them now. It was just one of those boxes you had to check for gen ed. And
Yep.
I think when I took mine, it was in the evening and it was so hard to stay awake in that class. And so, having a more passionate, I think, teacher. And I think sometimes, as instructors, we get better as we age because we become more passionate about what we're doing, and early on, it might be about, just teaching because we wanted to be able to do research or whatever.
Right.
But as we grow older, I know for myself, this is my 26th year teaching. I think my classes are a lot better now. Maybe I'm just getting delusional in my old age that I think I'm better. But I've added so much more material and passion to what I do that, and now, being 61, almost 61, talking about the importance of exercise as we get older, it's like it takes on more meaning than when I'm trying to teach that when I was 30.
Well, I think one of the reasons that, our instructors love teaching in OLLIs is the level of engagement among the students. There's so much lived experience in the classroom. Another one of my favorite stories is an instructor who is a physics professor, an adjunct physics professor at another university, teaches for us, on top of a full load at the university, because he said, your students are so engaged and I always learn something. So he was teaching a course on the Hubble telescope. And there was a gentleman in the class who occasionally would ask questions and then add really incisive commentary. And the instructor just stopped and he goes, "How do you know all this?" And the guy looked sheepishly and he said, "Well, I was the project manager to transport the Hubble telescope to the landing to launch or whatever." And then that student ended up teaching a class later also on the Hubble telescope. So I always tell our instructors, don't be too confident in your material because there are often people in the class who know more than you do, and that you have to have a degree of confidence to deal with that intellectual, repartee, but also to have a degree of humility so you can allow others to share their experience and to be curious about, what perspectives they can add.
Makes me as an instructor want to find a way to get those older people into my classes.
Right.
And we're so limited because of different rules with FERPA and all that you can't just invite somebody to participate in your class. But it would be nice to just have those few older, experienced adults sitting in on the classes that are going to engage the students more. And I think the students would benefit from it. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Well, the instructors, one of the things they find is they don't get through their material. They come with an hour and 20 minutes of PowerPoint or slides or lecture notes, and 15 minutes in, people are asking questions, and they're like, wait a minute, I said I was going to teach a 6-week course. I need 4 more weeks. We're like, maybe next term. So that's very common.
So let's see.
They're certainly not on their phones or computers during class, I can tell you.
That would be an advantage.
Yeah.
I don't find it's not too bad with my students getting on their phones while I'm lecturing, but as soon as you take a break, it's like all of a sudden the phones are out. It's like, when did this start? Because when I was a student, you engaged with your fellow classmates. You're talking to one another. You weren't communicating. And I always joke with them, and they're probably tweeting out how bad the class is, how bored they are, and that kind of stuff. But it's just wild that we don't have that same level of social interaction in the classroom as we used to.
Mm-hmm. It's a big shift.
And I think we need that older example to say, I think there's a lot of people out there who have gotten to the end of their career and realize, oh, there's so much I have not done and learned in life. And now's that opportunity to learn. Whereas when we're in college the first time, it's like, I just got to check these boxes so I can get out and get a job. And we don't appreciate the education opportunities that we have when we're younger.
Yeah, I was so obsessed with grade point average because I was headed to law school. And I dropped calculus. I can't afford to see.
Yeah, I dropped my last calculus class because I broke my hand like 2 weeks before the term started, and it was my writing hand, and I was in like this 90-degree cast. I couldn't write with my right hand. Had to write with my left hand. Had one of the most boring instructors I ever had in college. And it was in the afternoon when I tend to kind of doze off in classes. So it's like, that was probably one of the few classes I had to drop and retake in college.
Yeah.
Now I'd love to go back and be able to learn calculus again. So how can our listeners connect with you and OLLI at Duke, or really in any of their local areas? Is there a website, or is there other social media that they can kind of reach out to?
I would encourage them to go to the National Osher Resource Center. They Google that, or Osher NRC. I think they have a map of all the Osher Institutes across the whole country. The other thing that you can do locally is just Google OLLI and say Tampa, whatever city you're in. And it will usually direct you to a learning and retirement program or an Osher Institute. There are about 400 learning in retirement programs in the country. 125 are categorized as Osher Institutes, and that just means they have funding from the Osher Foundation. To learn more about OLLI at Duke, you can go to learnmore.duke.edu/OLLI and see our catalog for the winter term. Our spring catalog will be posted mid-March and registration will start in early April.
Great. Well, is there anything else that we have not discussed that you'd like to kind of conclude with?
One thing that I just have found, it's more intuitive, but I think it's really important to keep in mind is, our attitudes about aging make such a difference in both the quality and quantity of our life. There's a really interesting researcher, Becca Levy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's at Yale, who wrote a book called Breaking the Age Code. And it's all about how if you have positive attitudes toward aging, you can live on average 7 years longer than people who have negative attitudes. And attitudes are one thing that we have control over. And I think it's something that I see a deeper appreciation from, certainly among our members. But I think understanding the importance of staying connected to others and how you feel about aging and being around your peers is who are engaged and passionate about their life is really some of the best things you can do for yourself as you get older.
I think a lot of people, when we look at ageism, I think the worst of ageism is generally in the older population themselves. They think that I can't do this because I'm older. I'm supposed to be this way because I'm this particular age. And as a exercise physiologist, I refute those comments all the time. Like just the other day, I was teaching in my exercise testing and prescription class the norms for strength measurements. And I'm showing them how if I'm 20 and I can bench press my body weight. I am fair in terms of my fitness. Now at 60, if I can bench my body weight, I'm superhuman. And it's like, how is that possible? It's only 40 years. I shouldn't lose that much strength to where being moderately strong at 60 means that I'm just superhuman.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think many of us unconsciously just adopt the attitudes of our parents in terms of aging. And so if you were fortunate to have, very engaged, fit parents, you have kind of a lucky dividend. But if you didn't, it's easy enough to find people who are really engaged and positive and hang out with them, because that will make an enormous difference. I think we have a lot of advantages in this era around, knowing more about nutrition and heart health, and that you can build strength in your 70s and 80s and 90s still, and that makes a huge difference in your health span versus lifespan. We're all trying, many of us want to live longer. I want to live healthier as long as possible.
And that's how I look at it. I mean, I want to live long, but I don't want to, we describe kind of the 4 ages when we talk a lot on the podcast, and your first age being that kind of development dependent era in your life where you're preparing for your own jobs and things like that. And then you get into your second era is when you're independent, you're working in your jobs. And the third era is our retirement years, which is really probably most of your population in OLLI are the people who are in that third age. And then fourth age is that age of decline and decrepitude and nearing death. And that really should be, in a very successful life, a short period of time. I mean, for me, I want that fourth age to be about 15 minutes long, where I just I think my time's up. I'm going to go lay down and not wake up. And I'll be about 120 at the time, and I think that's possible for many of us, but we tend to think of age being in really 4 rather even periods of time. And that last fourth age is like 20 years or 30 years of, if we're lucky, that long of just really declining health. And that's not the way it should be.
Well, I think particularly, what I would want younger people to understand is just how much happier you are when you're older. Yeah. I think back in my 20s, and it was just such a hard, a difficult slog in terms of, figuring out who you are, who you want to be, and all the parental expectations, and how much freer many of us feel in our 50s, 60s, and beyond. So thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, this was great. I thank you for joining me in this episode. And, it's been extremely informative. And I hope our listeners will take advantage of the opportunities that are offered by the Osher Lifelong Institute or similar opportunities within their communities. Thank you, and keep aging well.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.